My ex said part of me was always waiting for someone else. What does that have to do with me? Every memory of home has you in it. You have always described yourself as straight, Noah. Straight, Noah. Ethan, was I the person you could never stop thinking about?
I knew the answer. I knew one word could destroy 15 years of friendship. To understand why, you have to go back 1 minute before my 21st birthday. Make a wish, Ethan, my roommate Miles said, but I had already spent years wishing for the straight best friend I was never supposed to love. At 11:59 that night, my apartment was crowded with classmates balancing pizza on paper plates, arguing over the music, and gathering around a cake whose candles were already beginning to melt. Everyone else watched the clock. I watched the front door. Noah Carter had been my best friend since we were 6 years old. He had taught me how to ride a bicycle, stayed beside me through my worst days, and remembered every birthday, even after college pulled us toward different states. 3 days earlier, he had sent a message saying he probably could not make the 6-hour drive home. I had replied that I understood, hiding the disappointment I could barely admit to myself. Loving Noah had never been a choice I made. It had grown quietly through childhood sleepovers, summer afternoons, and long conversations after midnight. By the time I understood what I felt, he was dating girls and introducing me as the friend who knew him better than anyone. I learned to laugh whenever he called me his favorite idiot, and to pretend the words did not stay with me long after our calls ended. During our senior year, friends often joked that Noah and I behaved like an old married couple because he knew my coffee order and I knew when his smile was hiding a difficult day. He always answered by throwing one arm around my shoulders and saying that best friends were allowed to know each other that well. I laughed with everyone else, even as that familiar answer closed another door inside me. When he left for college, I helped load his boxes and promised that nothing important would change. Then I stood in his empty driveway after his car disappeared and understood that distance could expose feelings I had managed to hide while he was near. Every visit home became something I anticipated for weeks and recovered from for days. No one at the party knew that my only birthday wish was impossible. As the final seconds disappeared, my friends lifted plastic cups of sparkling cider and began counting down. Midnight arrived with cheers, applause, and a painfully off-key birthday song. I leaned toward the candles, closed my eyes, and tried not to make the same wish again. Then someone knocked 3 times. The room quieted. Miles joked that any guest arriving this late owed me an extraordinary present, but my heart had already recognized the rhythm. The second knock was slow, confident, and familiar. When the door opened, Noah stood beneath the hallway light in a faded denim jacket and gray t-shirt, a travel bag hanging from one shoulder. His sandy brown hair was longer than I remembered, and exhaustion showed beneath his eyes, but his smile was exactly the same one that had made me feel safe since childhood. I could only stare. He had crossed 6 hours of highway after telling me he could not come, and he was looking at me as though there was nowhere else he wanted to be. Noah dropped his bag, crossed the room, and pulled me into a tight embrace before I found my voice. "Happy 21st, Ethan," he said quietly beside my ear. There was no chance I was going to miss this. Everyone cheered, seeing nothing more than 2 lifelong friends reunited. They could not feel my heartbeat racing against his chest. They could not know how many years I had imagined being held by him without believing it could mean anything. I started to step back, afraid that holding on any longer would expose me, but Noah tightened his arms for one unexpected second before letting go. Then he looked at me with an expression I had never seen before, nervous beneath all that familiar warmth. I told myself it meant nothing. I did not yet know about the small box hidden inside his travel bag, or that before this visit ended, Noah would make me question whether our friendship had been hiding more than either of us understood. Noah stayed close for the rest of the party, as though the distance between us had disappeared the moment he crossed my doorway. He greeted classmates he knew only from video calls, accepted a crooked slice of cake, and laughed when Miles announced that surprise guests were responsible for cleaning the kitchen. Every few minutes, I caught Noah watching me from across the room. Each time, he smiled and looked away, leaving me to wonder whether I had imagined the extra second in his gaze. Being near him brought back the summer when we were 6, and I was too frightened to climb the tallest playground slide. Noah had held out his hand and promised that if I fell, he would fall with me. It was a ridiculous promise from a first grader, yet he had spent 15 years keeping some version of it. He showed up when I broke my wrist learning to skateboard, when I failed my first driving test, and when my grandfather died during our senior year. Noah never offered perfect answers. He simply made sure I did not face difficult days alone. When someone at the party asked for our funniest childhood memory, Noah immediately described the treehouse we had attempted to build from discarded fence boards and one rusty hammer. The floor collapsed before either of us climbed onto it, leaving us in the dirt while a summer storm soaked the backyard. He remembered that I had worn a bright red baseball cap and refused to remove it even after mud covered the brim. I had forgotten the cap entirely. Noah remembered the color, the weather, and the exact joke that made us laugh until my father came outside to investigate. The room enjoyed a harmless story about two reckless children. I heard proof that Noah had preserved pieces of our life together that I assumed mattered only to me. College was the first thing strong enough to separate us. He accepted a scholarship nearly 350 miles away while I remained in our hometown to study graphic design. We called every Sunday at first. Then exams, internships, and new friendships pushed the calls to every other week, then once a month. I watched his new life arrive through photographs, football games, hiking trails, crowded diners, and eventually the same blonde woman beside him in almost every picture. Emily. Noah never needed to say that she was his girlfriend. The way he smiled around her told me enough. I became skilled at sounding happy for him, even when every update reminded me that being his best friend was the closest I would ever be allowed to stand. Near 1 in the morning, the party began to thin. A classmate asked how Noah and I had stayed friends for so long, and Noah answered before I could. Ethan remembers who I was before I started pretending I knew what I was doing. Everyone laughed, but his voice held something more serious than the words suggested. I studied him, noticing the tiredness behind his eyes and the way his fingers kept tracing the strap of his travel bag. Emily had not appeared once in any story he told that night. I tried not to notice, because noticing would invite hope, and hope had always made me careless around Noah. When most of my guests began leaving, Noah helped Miles collect cups while I wrapped the remaining cake. We reached for the same plate, and our fingers brushed. Noah froze for half a heartbeat before pulling his hand back. "Sorry," he said, although neither of us had anything to apologize for. His eyes shifted toward the travel bag by the door. For the first time, I noticed a dark blue ribbon peeking from its open pocket. Before I could ask about it, Noah looked toward the balcony and said, "Can we talk somewhere quiet? There are things I should have told you months ago." The balcony door closed behind us, softening the music and laughter inside the apartment. Warm summer air moved across the narrow space, carrying the smell of cut grass from the park below. Noah leaned against the railing with a bottle of sparkling water, while I stood close enough to hear every breath he took. For a few minutes, we avoided whatever serious conversation had brought us outside. We remembered the teachers we had secretly disliked, the neighborhood baseball games where neither of us could hit a decent pitch, and the promise we once made to rent an apartment together after high school. "You thought we could survive on frozen pizza," I reminded him. Noah smiled. "I still believe we could have." The answer sounded playful, but his eyes stayed on mine a little too long. He told me college had been harder than his photographs suggested. His classes were demanding, his internship consumed most weekends, and a campus filled with people could still feel lonely when none of them knew the version of him that existed at home. He said there were evenings when he returned from the engineering lab after midnight and almost called me, only to remember that I had an early class the next morning. Instead, he typed messages and deleted them because explaining loneliness through a phone screen felt more difficult than pretending everything was fine. The photographs he posted had become evidence for everyone else that he was thriving, so he eventually felt responsible for maintaining the picture. I understood more than I wanted to admit. My own cheerful updates had hidden overdue invoices, rejected design proposals, and weekends when I avoided calling because hearing his voice would remind me how much of my old life had moved away. I admitted that my life had not matched the confident updates I sent him either. Freelance design work barely covered groceries, and some nights I sat alone in the apartment wondering whether choosing a familiar town had been courage or fear. I wish you had told me, he said. You were busy, I answered. So were you. The quiet that followed held an entire year of missed calls and unfinished conversations. Noah looked toward the streetlights before asking whether I had met anyone. I told him I had gone on a few dates, but nothing lasted. I did not explain that every kind man I met was compared to the impossible standard standing beside me. When I asked about Emily, Noah's expression changed. Emily and I ended things 8 months ago, he said. Surprise made me turn toward him. He had never mentioned the breakup. Noah explained that there had been no betrayal and no dramatic argument. Emily wanted them to plan a future together, but Noah could describe that future without ever truly picturing himself inside it. She finally asked whether part of him belonged somewhere else, and he had not known how to answer. Sometimes caring about someone is not the same as understanding why you are with them, he said. I wanted to ask what he understood now, but hope had always been dangerous where Noah was concerned. Before I could speak, he glanced through the balcony door toward his travel bag by the apartment entrance and laughed nervously. I almost forgot why I asked you out here. He stepped inside, crossed the living room, and returned a moment later with a small box wrapped in brown paper and tied with the dark blue ribbon I had noticed. I bought this weeks ago, he said, before I knew whether I was coming. I took it carefully, feeling the surprising weight of such a small gift. Why did you tell me you could not make it? Noah looked down at the box between us. Because driving here was easy, he said. Admitting why I needed to be here was the difficult part. Then he met my eyes and added, Open it, Ethan. Maybe you will understand before I do. Inside the box rested a simple brown leather bracelet with a narrow silver plate engraved with 2 mountain peaks. I turned it beneath the balcony light, uncertain why Noah looked so nervous. Look at the other side, he said. 3 words had been etched into the back, still climbing together. The apartment, the party, and the distant traffic seemed to disappear. When we were 14, Noah and I had joined a summer hiking trip outside town. Halfway up the trail, I became convinced I could not finish the final mile. The other boys continued ahead, but Noah stayed. He matched my pace through every steep turn until we reached the overlook just before sunset. As orange lights spread across the valley, he told me it did not matter how long the climb took because we were still climbing together. I had forgotten his exact words. Noah had carried them for 7 years. You remembered, I said. He gave me an embarrassed smile. Some things never left me. I fastened the bracelet around my wrist. It fit so perfectly that I asked how he knew the size. Noah admitted that he had borrowed an old wristband from my desk during his last visit home. The thought of him planning the gift months earlier stirred a hope I was not prepared to trust. This is my favorite present, I told him. Relief softened his entire face. I asked whether he had designed the engraving himself, and Noah admitted that he had sketched the 2 peaks 3 different times before taking the idea to a small shop near his campus. The first version had looked too elaborate, while the second felt like something anyone could buy. He wanted the final bracelet to mean something only the 2 of us would immediately understand. That confession affected me more than the silver or leather ever could. Noah had not chosen a convenient birthday present during the drive home. He had carried a private memory into a store weeks earlier, protected it from explanation, and trusted that I would recognize it. I ran one finger over the mountains, wondering how many other memories he had kept without telling me. For another hour, we talked with the ease we once shared every day. He described disastrous meals cooked by his roommates, and I told him about the bakery owner who always added an extra cookie because she thought I looked too thin. The conversation felt ordinary, but every glance carried the weight of what neither of us had said. Miles eventually stepped onto the balcony and announced that he was going to bed. Try not to solve every mystery in the universe tonight, he said before disappearing down the hallway. Noah checked the time and reached for his phone. He said he should find a hotel, but I refused. My couch folded into a bed, and no best friend of mine was paying for a room after driving 6 hours. You are still stubborn, he said. I learned from you, I replied. We returned inside and cleaned the kitchen together. The simple rhythm of washing and drying dishes felt strangely domestic, as if we were practicing a life neither of us had ever named. While placing a glass beside the coffee maker, Noah noticed a framed photograph of us covered in mud after winning a neighborhood obstacle race. He lifted it and smiled, but the smile faded into something more vulnerable. Do you remember how certain we were that we would do everything together? He asked. I said we had been children who believed distance could not change anything. Noah traced one thumb along the edge of the frame. Maybe distance did not change us, he said. Maybe it only gave us more places to hide. My heartbeat quickened. When he looked at me again, the question in his expression felt larger than friendship. Then his phone lit up on the counter with a message. He turned face down before I could read it. Ethan, he said quietly, have you ever wondered what would have happened if we had never drifted apart? I tried to make Noah's question harmless. I joked that we would still argue about pizza, borrow each other's clothes, and lose every neighborhood basketball game. He laughed, but the thoughtful expression remained. Or maybe we missed more than that, he said. Before I could ask what he meant, his phone vibrated again. He glanced at the screen and silenced the call. When I asked whether something was wrong, he said a classmate was worried about their group project. The explanation sounded reasonable, but he slipped the phone into his pocket as if the messages belonged to a life he did not want entering this room. We unfolded the couch and spread clean sheets across the mattress. Noah sat on the edge, turning the empty bracelet box between his hands. Coming here almost did not happen, he admitted. I assumed he meant school, but he shook his head. He had nearly convinced himself that I no longer needed him. Our calls had become less frequent. I had new friends, my own apartment, and work that kept me busy. Noah thought arriving without warning might feel like forcing himself into a life that had moved on. I thought the same thing about you, I said. For a moment, we stared at each other, then laughed at the absurdity. We had both mistaken silence for indifference and distance for choice. I admitted that I had drafted messages after several of his photographs appeared online, asking whether he was truly happy, but I always erased them before sending. Noah confessed that he had recorded a voice message on my last birthday and deleted it because he sounded too emotional after midnight. Neither of us could explain why honesty had felt safer when we were children than it did after becoming adults. Back then, we announced every fear without considering how it might sound. Now we edited ourselves until only jokes and practical updates remained. The distance between us had not been created by a single argument. It had been assembled from hundreds of small decisions to say less than we meant, each one reasonable until they formed an entire year of distance. Noah leaned back against the couch. How can two people know each other for 15 years and still misunderstand the most important things? I sat in the chair across from him, afraid of the answer forming inside me. He asked whether I had ever been angry when he stopped calling. I told him the truth. I had not been angry. I had been hurt because I missed him more than I wanted to admit. His gaze softened. I missed you too, he said. The words should have comforted me, but the careful way he spoke made them feel like the beginning of something else. Miles entered the kitchen for a glass of water before Noah could continue. He looked from the bracelet on my wrist to the open bed and grinned. You two still look exactly like you did in high school, he said. Everyone used to think one of you had a crush on the other. My chest tightened. Miles laughed, apologized for interrupting, and returned to his room without realizing what he had left behind. The apartment became painfully quiet. I focused on the floor, certain that one glance would reveal every secret I had protected for years. Noah did not laugh. He did not look offended. Instead, he studied the old photograph on the counter as if it contained an answer. People said that often, he finally murmured. I forced a smile and said people enjoyed inventing stories. Maybe, Noah replied. He moved closer, not enough to touch me, but enough that I could see uncertainty behind his eyes. Or maybe they noticed something we were too afraid to examine. His phone vibrated once more. This time he ignored it completely. I need to ask you a question, he said, then stopped. Whatever he saw in my face changed his mind. Not tonight, he whispered. I am not ready to hear the answer yet. Sleep came in fragments. Miles's careless joke and Noah's unfinished question repeated in my mind until nearly 3 in the morning. When I finally woke, sunlight was slipping through my bedroom curtains, and the smell of coffee filled the apartment. Noah stood at the stove in a clean white t-shirt, turning pancakes with more confidence than I remembered him possessing. Happy first morning of being 21, he said. I decided one cake was not enough sugar for a birthday. The familiar teasing eased some of the tension, but not all of it. We ate across from each other at the small kitchen table, talking about movies and mutual friends while carefully avoiding the conversation from the night before. Every time our eyes met, one of us looked away a second too late. After breakfast, Noah suggested walking through the neighborhood. The morning was warm, with a light breeze moving through the maple trees. We passed the elementary school where we met, the baseball field where we spent countless summers, and the bookstore with the same faded blue sign above its entrance. The owner recognized us and said we looked older, but somehow unchanged. Before we left the bookstore, Noah paused beside the shelf where we once hid handwritten notes inside adventure novels, convinced we had invented a secret communication system no adult could discover. The owner laughed when Noah asked whether one of those books was still available. It was gone, but the question reminded me that nearly every block in town contained some version of us. At a cafe across the street, Noah bought 2 iced coffees, remembering without asking that I preferred mine with very little sugar. As we continued toward the park, he pointed out the cracked sidewalk that had sent me flying from my bicycle in 4th grade and the corner of the baseball field that offered the best shade during July practices. Noah moved through those places slowly, studying them as though he was comparing the boy he had been with the man trying to understand himself now. For once, I did not rush him toward an answer. At the park, we stopped beside the lake where families spread blankets beneath the trees. Noah rested his arms on the wooden railing and watched ducks drift across the water. "I miss this place," he said. "It always felt like home." I told him it still did. He was silent long enough that I knew he was gathering courage. "Can I tell you something I have never admitted to anyone?" he asked. I nodded. Noah explained that after his relationship with Emily ended, everyone assumed he was heartbroken. The breakup had unsettled assumptions he had never thought to question. He cared about her, but the future he had planned with her had felt like a role he was trying to perform correctly. For 8 months, he had examined every relationship and every version of the life he thought he was supposed to want. He still had no conclusion, but driving home for my birthday was the first decision in months that felt completely honest. Noah said he should have dismissed Miles's joke about us. Instead, the idea had followed him through the night. He finally turned toward me with open uncertainty. Then he took a slow breath and asked the question he had postponed. "Ethan, why do I feel as though you already understand what I am trying to understand about myself?" For a moment, I considered telling Noah everything. Instead, I retreated behind a careful answer about how failed relationships can reveal parts of themselves they have not yet understood. It was honest, but it was not the confession Noah was asking for. He accepted my evasion with a slow nod. We followed the path around the water, neither of us willing to end the conversation. Our shoulders brushed twice. Each contact was accidental, but Noah did not move farther away. At the old wooden bench where we used to eat lunch after school, he asked whether people could ignore something obvious for years. "People see things when they are ready," I said. Noah repeated the word ready, as if testing whether it belonged to him. His phone rang again, and this time he answered. I heard only pieces of the conversation. He told a classmate he was staying one more day and promised to explain when he returned. "You are extending your trip?" I asked after he ended the call. Noah nodded. "I came here because I thought I missed home. I need another day to understand whether home was ever the place." The meaning warmed and frightened me at once. We spent the afternoon retracing familiar streets. We drank milkshakes at the diner we had visited after Little League games, chose songs on the old jukebox, and laughed at photographs of our younger selves on the community wall. Noah ordered vanilla, because he claimed the diner had never learned how to make chocolate properly, restarting an argument we had carried since middle school. He fed $1 into the jukebox and selected the song that played during our high school graduation, then pretended the choice was accidental when I recognized it. On the community wall, we found a photograph of our Little League team. Noah stood in the back row with one hand resting on my shoulder, both of us grinning despite a season in which our team won only 3 games. He took a picture of the photograph and made it the lock screen on his phone before I could tease him. The gesture was simple, but it felt like another quiet decision to stop treating our shared past as something he needed to outgrow. For several hours, being together felt effortless. Beneath every laugh, however, the unfinished question remained. Near sunset, dark clouds gathered over downtown. The sudden summer rain drove us beneath the bookstore awning, and the story caught up with the question you heard at the beginning. Noah stood before me, waiting, while every year of our friendship pressed against the silence. For the first time, I let the silence belong to courage rather than fear. The choice was mine. I finally stopped hiding. "Yes," I said. The word was quiet, but Noah heard it. His expression softened with understanding rather than shock. I told him I had loved him for years, though I could not name the exact day friendship became something more. I had kept it private through his relationships, our long separations, and every moment when honesty felt more dangerous than silence, because losing him frightened me more than carrying the secret alone. You were my best friend first, I said. I could survive never being chosen. I did not know whether I could survive you walking away. Noah looked toward the rain-darkened street. All these years, you protected our friendship by hurting alone. I told him that I had not wanted my feelings to become his burden. I explained that I first suspected the truth on the night of our high school graduation, when everyone else was celebrating and I could only think about how soon he would leave. Noah had found me sitting alone behind the gym and promised that college would not erase us. I wanted to tell him then, but his acceptance letter was folded inside his jacket and his entire future seemed to be opening. I could not bear the idea of placing my fear in the doorway. Afterward, every good moment created a new reason to remain silent. When he began dating Emily, I told myself silence was respect. When our calls became less frequent, I called it maturity. Only now could I admit that fear had borrowed reasonable names because I was not brave enough to use its real one. He closed his eyes briefly, replaying memories from a new perspective. Then he admitted that every new place, relationship, and plan had felt temporary. Whenever something important happened, I was the first person he wanted to call. Whenever he pictured coming home, he pictured wherever I was. I told myself that was what best friends did, he said. Maybe that was true. Maybe it was not the whole truth. I asked what he felt now. Noah did not offer a dramatic certainty he could not honestly possess. He said he was still learning how to name feelings he had spent years placing inside the word friendship. He did know that the possibility of losing me hurt more than the questions frightened him. His roommate had asked why he looked happier planning my birthday trip than he ever looked preparing for a date. That question had followed him through every mile of the drive. I came because missing you had stopped feeling simple, he said. The rain began to soften. Noah stepped closer, leaving enough space for me to move away. I stayed. He reached for my hand slowly and waited until I closed my fingers around his. The gesture was small, but nothing between us felt ordinary anymore. I do not want to promise answers I do not have, he said. I can promise honesty. If you are willing, I want to understand this with you, one step at a time. I asked whether he was choosing me or merely afraid of losing our history. Noah considered the question before answering. I am choosing the chance to discover what our history has been trying to tell me. His thumb brushed the edge of the bracelet. No pressure. No pretending. Just us telling the truth for once. Relief arrived alongside fear, neither canceling the other. We did not need a perfect label beneath that bookstore awning. We needed permission to stop hiding. I nodded and told him I was willing. Noah smiled with the same warmth that had steadied me on the playground 15 years earlier. Then, still holding my hand, he said, "Let us stop wondering what we might have become and start finding out together." 1 year later, I stood in the same apartment as friends gathered around another birthday cake. The decorations were better, the pizza was still excessive, and Noah had claimed control of the playlist before Miles could object. Some traditions had survived unchanged. Our lives had not. After completing his final semester, Noah accepted an entry-level engineering position 20 minutes from my apartment. He rented a place nearby instead of moving in with me immediately because we had agreed not to rush our future simply because our past was long. That decision became one of many ways we learned to build a relationship rather than assume friendship had already taught us everything. The months after the rainstorm were not effortless. Noah needed time to understand himself without feeling pressured to select a perfect label, and I needed to believe he was choosing the present rather than repaying years of loyalty. We spoke honestly when fear appeared. We went on quiet dates, argued about ordinary things, and discovered that romance did not replace the friendship beneath it. It asked us to become even more truthful. Our first official date took place at the same diner where we had argued over milkshake flavors for years. We were both so nervous that the waitress asked whether we had received bad news. By dessert, we were laughing again, relieved to discover that romance did not require us to become strangers performing a different kind of relationship. Other moments demanded more patience. Noah sometimes worried that uncertainty made his feelings unfair to me, while I sometimes treated every hesitation as evidence that he would eventually leave. We learned to pause before defending ourselves, to ask what the other person meant, and to separate an honest question from rejection. Those conversations were not cinematic, but they became the strongest evidence that we were building something capable of lasting beyond the excitement of finally being together. Our families noticed the change before we formally explained it. My mother had watched Noah arrive for Sunday dinners since childhood. When I finally told her he was my boyfriend, she smiled across the table and said she had been waiting for our hearts to catch up with our courage. Noah laughed so hard that he nearly spilled his iced tea. His parents welcomed me with the same kindness they had always shown, reminding him that a life built on honesty was never something to apologize for. Their acceptance did not erase every uncertainty, but it made the future feel lighter. Most people at the party already knew we were together, but several friends from Noah's college had never heard him call me his boyfriend. He had asked me to let him choose that moment in his own time, and I had agreed. As midnight approached, Miles dimmed the lights, and everyone began the familiar birthday song. Noah stepped beside me before I could blow out the candles and handed me a small package wrapped in dark blue paper. "Another bracelet?" I asked. "Open it," he said. Inside was a polished steel keychain. One side carried the same mountain peaks engraved on the bracelet around my wrist. The other read, "Still climbing together." Beneath the keychain rested a key to his new apartment. Noah quickly explained that it was not an invitation to move in before I was ready. It meant I no longer had to knock before entering the life he was building. The distinction mattered more to me than any grand gesture could have. One of Noah's college friends raised a camera and asked him to stand beside his best friend for a photograph. The room quieted just enough for me to hear his answer. Noah slipped his hand into mine and smiled with the calm confidence that had taken him a year to earn. "He is still my best friend," he said. "He is also my boyfriend." Warm laughter and a few surprised congratulations filled the room. Looking at him, I remembered the boy who had held out his hand when I was frightened on the playground, the teenager who stayed beside me on the mountain, and the young man who drove 6 hours because missing me had finally become a truth he could not ignore. When I closed my eyes to make my birthday wish, I realized I no longer wished for impossible things. The person I loved was beside me, not because fate had solved everything for us, but because we had chosen honesty, patience, and each other. For the first time, the road ahead did not feel uncertain. It felt like home.